I'm a lead DevOps engineer making over 6 figures a year, tax-free, working from Abu Dhabi. Hold your horses. I know you've heard this before. You're thinking it's a scam. All your alarm bells are ringing. There's another tech guru. He's gonna sell us a course that doesn't work. It's a boot camp. It's a scam. I'm not doing this. It's not 2022. You can't get into DevOps anymore. Let me break all those limiting beliefs in one video. Pay attention. I'm gonna actually start off telling you guys my journey and a bit about my background, and then you guys can decide whether I'm a fraud or not. So first things first, I come from a non-technical background. Yes, that means I didn't study a computer science degree. I actually studied mechanical engineering, and before I decided to make my career transition, I was at a point in my life where I have never written a piece of code ever. In fact, I had some sort of fear around computers. I felt like you had to be some sort of genius in order to be able to code. I felt like this would never be for me. And I thought this was so far-fetched to actually becoming any sort of role in the tech space, whether that is software dev, DevOps, whatever it was. I thought this isn't for me. But then I actually came across a customer on my graduate scheme. This might sound weird, but I was actually in a project management graduate scheme. And that's the moment I began to consider a career transition. One of our customers that walked in wasn't your ordinary customer. I actually ended up speaking to him for over an hour and a half, maybe close to 2 hours. And then he said something that piqued my interest. He said he is now going to go back to work. And I said, oh, so you work in one of these offices around us, near us? Where do you work? I was slightly curious. He said, no, I need to go home. Now I was extra confused. I was like, you said you're working, but you need to head home to work. And by the way, this was somewhat pre-COVID days. So remote working was an extremely foreign concept. And this individual was like, yeah, I work from home. And he was renting a Range Rover for over 3 weeks. Not only was this a very expensive rental, so I already was able to assume that he was well off. Sorry for pocket watching, guys. He's telling me he's working from home as well. And I asked him, what do you do? And he told me that he works in DevOps. He's a DevOps engineer, cloud engineer, and he's a contractor. And I was like, okay, what does that entail? You know, what does that sort of look like financially? And I was a curious kid with no shame. And this individual might be watching this YouTube video today and remembers that 21-year-old kid asking him how much he makes as a contractor. And kudos to him for being completely transparent. He told me that he was making £950 a day outside IR35. That means he could be tax efficient with his money. I don't think you know what that sort of money is. £950 a day. When I was told that at the age of 21, I thought you must be some sort of Forex trader, some sort of entrepreneur. How can a job pay you that much? All limiting beliefs in my head were like, poof. And he just portrayed it as the most easily accessible thing. He was like, yeah, you can do it too. I was like, he's like, yeah, you're more educated than me. I don't even have a degree. And I was just in awe. And that was the moment where I decided to make a career transition to the tech industry. So what I did next is what every person does when they're trying to break into tech. YouTube, Python tutorial, free code camp. I think that's just a rite of passage for everyone that started off their tech journey, right? And quickly I realized that this isn't working. I'm doing leak code type questions that I'm not actually being asked in interviews unless they're sort of software engineering graduate schemes. And then I started to explore DevOps, and I started off with what most people do, the cloud practitioner, the AWS cloud practitioner, where some people do the Azure fundamentals. And what I did next was actually start applying for roles. I was actually extremely aggressive, and I started applying for jobs that I wasn't qualified for and reverse engineering the requirements when it came to interviews. As soon as I was getting an interview for a DevOps role, started learning about Terraform, started learning about Docker, and trying to showcase these skills in the interview, explaining concepts like CI/CD and so on and so forth. This actually worked out and allowed me to land 2 junior DevOps roles plus a graduate DevOps program, which is what appealed to me and what I actually selected because it offered that development and a 12-week structured bootcamp where they were going to teach me everything I knew. And that's where my learning journey actually began. And trust me, that structure changed everything for me. I went from wasting my time doing LinkedIn learning courses to having structured learning. Now, that being said, I was almost 1 year into my graduate scheme and I wasn't getting exposed to the in-demand tools that I needed to increase my employability on the market. And I knew this straight away. I was looking at job specs that were asking for Kubernetes, Kafka, and things that I never was exposed to on my job. And what I decided to do was reverse engineer again. I started to actively do projects or gain certifications in those popular toolings things that companies were asking for. I did my Kubernetes administrator certification and started to apply elsewhere. And at that 1 year mark, I actually managed to land a role as a junior DevOps engineer at an AI startup. And honestly, this is where everything changed for me. I shifted from being in a complacent graduate program in a consultancy environment to working in a product environment that was extremely fast-paced, not to mention it's a startup with only 3 DevOps engineers. So you can imagine the workload that we had and the responsibility that we had on the whole company. This actually meant that the work that I was doing had immediate impact and company-wide. Now, the one thing that people don't understand about the tech industry is that it's not about the number of years of experience that you have. The reason why I was able to land 6-figure roles so early in my career is because of the quality of experience that I had. And I actually have interview feedback where interviewers have said in their feedback section, despite me not typically having the years of experience, YOE, I vividly remember this being written in the feedback, Murad has shown the competency or skills needed in order to be a senior platform engineer or senior DevOps engineer due to his exposure in a fast-paced startup environment. Having to wear many hats in a startup actually accelerated my learning. It's almost like doing dog years. Now, you might be struggling to believe this, and I actually did at the same time. How did this kid from completely no technical background now suddenly be in a position where he's applying for 6-figure roles? And by the way, I wasn't just someone that came from a non-technical background. I hated computers. Like, my family could actually tell you about this. I was the least tech savvy person. I wish I had my IT teacher from school. Excel would give me anxiety. I'm not someone that was tech savvy, but I am someone that was able to apply myself when I had a goal and follow through as a result of my discipline. And it leads on to this strange question that I don't know how I feel about answering. And maybe I shouldn't say it online as someone that has a job, but I'm not particularly passionate about what I do. I don't have that sort of story. I wasn't that kid that was hacking Minecraft servers at the age of 12, 13, that was always tech savvy. I don't have any of that sort of background. I was someone that actively decided to go into a career for reasons such as financial, it being financially lucrative, remote working, and that sort of flexibility that you get in order to have more autonomy of your life. And that is something that was really important to me. So it might not sound as noble as others, in which they wanted to write thousands of lines of code to have worldwide impact, but it was things that was important to me. I was able to spend more time with family through remote working. I was able to be there closer for my nephews, nieces, be more present. These things actually meant a lot to me at the time that I made my career transition. And I was genuinely happy. I was even working as a digital nomad for a long period of time. I was working in areas such as Casablanca in Morocco, to Antalya in Turkey, to Dubrovnik and Split in Croatia. Not to mention spending a year in Doha. Like, these experiences mean more than any amount of lines of code that I could have written. Now, the moment that I shifted from that AI startup to being a senior DevOps engineer, a lot of things started to change for me. I actually shifted from being one of the most junior people on my team to being a senior person on the team that people would actually seek guidance and support from. And in fact, the responsibilities sometimes feel unknown. I started my first week having to debug something, feeling massive levels of imposter syndrome, and that area of I have this senior title I need to perform. And for a lot of people, this can actually make or break them, especially quite early on in their career. I didn't have 4 or 5 years of experience. I was still early stages. This allowed me to thrive and actually highlight more skill sets that I wasn't aware of that I actually had. I was able to leverage my soft skills better. I was able to understand how to manage stakeholders effectively, how to manage expectations. A lot of things that are actually really important in the corporate world started to come into play as I became more senior. It was no longer about just being able to do your technical task without requiring help, but actually streamlining processes. And you could just imagine the imposter syndrome. Again, the kid from no technical background, no computer science degree, once upon a time hated computers, to now finding himself as a senior DevOps engineer amongst a team that are now asking him for help and guidance on certain problems. You couldn't write this. And the final stage of my career to touch on is me going from a senior DevOps engineer to a lead DevOps engineer. And that happened within the space of 6 months. And I'm gonna be breaking down the exact skills that are needed in order to transition from a senior to a lead DevOps engineer in future videos. And it's not gonna be what you expect. So if you wanna know the exact strategies that I implemented in order to upskill and excel in existing roles, and also be able to effectively apply to high-paying remote roles to provide me with that location freedom and flexibility in my day-to-day life, tune in for more videos.